All right. Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Paul. I'm one of the school counselors here at Wayne Valley High School. With me today is Mr. Robert Traitz. He's been with us for what are we going on, 6 or 7 years, Bob?
At least, yeah.
At least. Very informative, a lot of great information. It is very nuanced. So we are recording this and we will be posting it to our page on the Wayne Valley webpage under the school counselors tab. We have Mr. Robert Traitz here. I asked that everybody keep your camera and your microphone muted for now. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Like I said, this process is highly nuanced. So if it is very specific, very special circumstance, we have opportunity at a later date to run through some of those very specific questions. I know Mr. Traitz makes himself available to our families if they have a quick question, but we also have pathways for people to get some of those very specific questions answered. So without further ado, Mr. Traitz, please take it away.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Hope everybody is wide awake on this cloudy morning. Um, just a little bit about myself to begin with. I am a certified financial planner. I'm also an accredited investment fiduciary. I've worked in the financial services industry for above 30 years. Let's just leave it at that. And of course, I've been doing financial aid presentations for, let's say, around 25 years. Number of different high schools that I speak at. And I've also spoken with the State of New Jersey Department of Higher Education, also known as HESA, HESAA, Higher Education and Students Assistance Authority. What we're going to talk about this morning is financial aid, what you need to do as things go live next week. And I'll explain that. So senior parents, this is something that it particularly applies to you, junior parents. It applies to you next year, at which point we'll probably have another meeting like this. I live locally. I have 3 children, all been through the college process and off in the working world. And so not only is my expertise as a certified financial planner in everything related to finances, it includes college financial planning, income tax, goal setting, investments, and a number of other areas of concentration. At the bottom of almost every slide, you'll see my contact information. Senior parents, I encourage you to feel free to reach out for me as you begin the process of completing the financial aid form. So let's begin. So hopefully you can see the whole screen. Senior timeline. October 1st, next week, the FAFSA pre-application for federal student aid and the CSS profile goes live. You cannot access the 2026-27 FAFSA until the 1st of October. That doesn't mean that you really have to get started that quickly. You do have some time. We'll talk about that. So you should have, or your students should have compiled their college lists because you're going to need the names of the colleges as you begin the financial aid application process. Applications can be submitted in a number of ways. There's early action, there's regular application, and there's also early decision, which I frown upon, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. In February, the application receipt for college application is confirmed and has begun the processing. One important thing I want to point out on this slide is that May 1st decision deadline. Just keep that in the back of your mind. So what we're going to talk about, federal financial aid, which is very, very limited. And there is a FAFSA, pre-application for federal student aid demo that I'm going to share the link with you in a little while. So there's federal student aid, which is somewhat limited. State student aid, that's Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. That's also somewhat limited. There's merit aid. That's where the bulk of the money comes from. And then, of course, scholarships from other sources. We'll talk a little bit about that. Something that I think is often ignored is the tax benefits of paying for higher education. We'll address that too, being that I have a solid background in the tax filing process. I do not file taxes, but I can review them. I don't charge for that. Giving advice, feel free to call me, email me, text me. My information is at the bottom of the screen. So again, we're going to talk about a number of things. How do you approach it? What do we have to do? Well, the primary form is as I said, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. You can tap into it by not Googling, but actually putting in your browser, fafsa.gov. In advance of being able to start the FAFSA, senior parents, you're going to have to apply for an ID and a password, one for your student and one for the parent. Because the FAFSA is a two-part process. They changed the FAFSA, supposedly making it easier a couple of years ago. There was a huge delay in 2023. Typically, the FAFSA becomes available on October 1st, as I mentioned. In 2023, parents were having trouble processing or actually applying till well into the beginning of 2024. And many students actually didn't get financial aid as they were working out the bugs. So an important website is a hyperlink in blue. It's studentaid.gov/FSA, dash ID. We'll talk about that in a minute. The new FAFSA has a requirement that you have to agree to it was the old data retrieval tool. Now it's the direct connection to the IRS website through the FTI, Federal Tax Information hyperlink that you're going to experience when you start filling out the FAFSA. You're required to agree, the student is required to agree, even if the student didn't file a tax return. If you don't click the I agree button, your FAFSA will not be processed. And again, at any time, as Michael had mentioned, just click on the chat box, ask a question, and in an opportune time while we're talking about a particular topic, Michael will ask the question and I'll give you whatever answers you require. So the indicator, I should say, for federal financial aid, and again, I refer to federal financial aid because the FAFSA is a federal form, is called the Student Aid Index. It used to be known as the EFC. EFC is gone as of 23. Student Aid Index is now the result of you filling out the FAFSA, both student and parent. The numbers are going to be based on 2024. This slide says 23. That has to be updated. The interesting thing about this is we're filling out a financial aid application for students who will begin attending school in the fall of 2026. Yet they're using information that is 2 years old. They're using a 2024 tax return. It is referred to as prior. And again, it was the brainchild of the Department of Education to change this. Part of the reason is that many parents had their tax return on extension, and extension means that the addended tax return has to be filed by October 15th. So now it's a 2-year prior. Student Aid Index is going to give you some information. It's not going to be the end all. Excuse me. So who should file a FAFSA? Every student who graduates high school now is required to file the FAFSA, whether they're going to qualify for federal or any financial aid whatsoever. It's been made a requirement, at least here in the state of New Jersey, that in order to get your high school diploma, the FAFSA has to be filed. So what you'll need for filing process is your 2024 tax return. You're going to need to refer to the asset number, or excuse me, the numbers on that, and also your savings and investments. There is a FAFSA worksheet. Again, if you want, you can copy the link below. Michael, I believe you're going to be making this slide presentation available to the students by putting it on the high school web portal.
That is correct.
Okay. So when you click on, or when you actually search studentaid.gov and begin to apply for the ID and password, and again, one for the student, one for the parent, my suggestion is that you sit down in front of a computer with your son or daughter, shoulder to shoulder, let them sort of pilot the website. And you begin the process by filing an FSA ID application first for the student. I say first for the student because you don't want them to run away as you're in the process of doing it for you, the parent. So you're going to hit the create button. The create button allows you to begin entering the information. First name, last name, social security number, date of birth, cell phone number, a number of other contact pieces of information. As you can see, this is a landing page. It's create an account. You're going to see something along the lines of what this page looks like. And again, I'm using last year's. The government or the Department of Education does have a habit of changing things every single year, making it fun, right? So what we're going to be talking about is how this formula is calculated. So the student aid index, which is the product of you entering the information regarding parents' income, parents' savings and investments, students' income, if any, students' savings and investments, all reported on the FAFSA. And the other ingredient is the cost of attendance. Now, every college and university in the United States publishes on their website the expected cost of attending, which includes all in tuition, fees, room and board, transportation to and from. Now, what I mean by to and from, my daughter Danielle, as an example, attended school. I'm here in Wyckoff, New Jersey. My daughter Danielle attended Drexel University in Philadelphia. So to travel from Wyckoff to Philadelphia, when we drove her down there and get her all situated in her dormitory, there were certain costs to that. She would come home for Thanksgiving and go back to school. We take her to the train station. There's a cost of that also. She'd come home for Christmas holiday. And of course, there was a cost of that and getting back to school and so on and so forth. So tuition, fees might be for labs. Fees might be for study abroad. Then there's a cost of room and board, whether they are living on campus or in a dormitory. Again, typically the freshman student will live in a dorm. So all in, the cost of attendance is an estimated number that the college will give you. She majored in communications and graphic arts. So she had a lot of art supplies, computer that was graphic art capable. So there were a number of other things that she had to buy, which were required for her major. All of those things are factored into the cost of attendance. Though the cost of attendance might be a greater number or less of a number than you're actually going to spend. It's used as a guide. And based on calculating financial need, you look at each individual college's cost minus the student aid index, again, the product of filling out the FAFSA, and that determines financial need. Again, I encourage you to ask questions all throughout this presentation. So what are we looking at? The tax return that I'm putting on the screen is fictitious. It is for John and Susie Q. Public. What we're looking at in box number 1 is the W-2 wages. In this case, they earned $100,000. What we're looking at also, a little further down, keeping in mind that I created this tax return of a family of 4. So we have Dick and Jane as the children, as indicated in the dependent box. In this case, John is a plumber and he's self-employed. So not only does he draw a wage from a W-2 as an employee of the company he owns, but he also has a profit and loss, which I think is a beautiful thing. The reason being, for those parents who do have small businesses, the opportunity is enormous. In this case, we were able to show a loss of about $26,000 from operating his business. We were able to reduce his W-2 wages by 26.5, bringing it down to 75,500. Now, this print is very small, but I want to point out the fact that we're looking at the adjusted gross income, AGI. The adjusted gross income on your tax return is line number 11. Please make a note of that. On line 11, that is the number that the IRS transfer tab on the FAFSA will bring into your FAFSA as far as your income is concerned. It's an important number because the adjusted gross income is calculated at 22 to 47%. And that goes toward your student aid index. So let's give you a quick example. If all they had is income of $100,000, and if John were not self-employed and we weren't able to reduce his taxable income, this number on line 11, your adjusted gross income would be 100,000. At $100,000, 47% of that means that you can afford to pay $47,000 a year toward one student going to college. $47,000 a year. Now, just in your mind, you got an idea of what your tax return reports, and figure 47% of that number on line 11 is your student aid index, what you're expected to be able to afford to pay. Colleges could run anywhere from $35,000 for a state school to $80,000, $90,000 a year as far as the cost of attendance is concerned. So the question, obviously, you're probably asking yourself, is it really worth me filling out the FAFSA? Well, again, the FAFSA is kind of required to get that diploma. But filling out the FAFSA is important in helping to determine what kind of student aid you're going to wind up with. Keeping in mind that this is a federal form, there is limited federal funds available, and only for families who show financial need. So even in the case of John and Susie Q, they're not really demonstrating a lot of need. But let's talk more about how you can wind up for financial aid. Just to go back for a moment, when you type in your browser, fafsa.gov, this is going to be your landing page. On your landing page, you're going to see a series of videos, which I just suggest you really ignore. The videos are just going to waste your time. The FAFSA is easy enough to complete and file on your own. When you go into the FAFSA, and again, the print is rather small, you say start, and in this case, it says start your 2025-26 FAFSA. After October 1st, when you access the FAFSA, you're going to want to start working on the 2026-27 FAFSA. When you hit this page, you're going to sign in as the student. Even if it's the parents completing the FAFSA, go in as the student. And again, when you go in, a lot of the information is going to be pre-populated, providing that you applied for your ID and password. Again, remember, the ID and password, one for the student, one for the parent. So when you access the FAFSA as the student, the first name, last name, social, date of birth, a lot of the information is already going to be in there, and you're going to be able to start working on some simple questions as the student. Now, I want to just sideline for a moment. There is a FAFSA demo. Now, you can play with the demo right now or after we finish this call, or you can just wait till next week on October 1st, and you can actually go into the FAFSA directly, providing you have your ID and password set up. When you go into the FAFSA, you begin to work on it. It saves every page as you continue to click the bottom of the button, the button at the bottom of the page, it says continue. You can leave the FAFSA and come back where you left off. Not only that, you can also submit the FAFSA as a student, and you can always go back in and edit the FAFSA. So it's not necessarily something that is restrictive, it's very flexible. But again, on this page, you'll see the FAFSA demo. You'll click on the prototype /2627. You'll enter the access code, prototype 2627, and you'll be able to play around with it if you want to do it in advance of the FAFSA going live. There's a get help button. I'm just going to click through that because you'll see these slides as Michael posts them on the high school website. So again, the landing page, you're going to go in for the 26-27 FAFSA, start off by going in as the student, ignore those how-to videos. And once you proceed through the FAFSA application as the student, it's going to ask you to invite a contributor. A contributor is the parent. So the student, as they enter the information, including the list of schools that they want this student aid report to go to, they will invite the parent who has the ID and the password. The parent ultimately will receive an email once the student submits their end of it. The parent will then click on the email and enter their ID and password and complete their process. Remember, it's important to agree to the FTI, the federal transfer, so that your tax information will be automatically populating the fields of the FAFSA. Once the FAFSA is processed, the student aid report is delivered. It comes to the student via email. So mom and dad, make sure that your son or daughter informs you of every email that they get from the Department of Education. The student aid report will indicate the student aid index, SAI, which is an idea of what it costs to send one student to college for 1 year. You'll also have an opportunity to look at all the questions on the left side and all of the answers you provided on the right side, so that if you see a mistake or you feel something has to be changed, you can go back into the FAFSA and edit it. You can also add and delete schools. So it's very flexible. And as I said, in the process of you working through this, feel free to reach out for me if you get stuck. So this is an example of a family of four with a student aid index of 33,850. The SAI means that they can afford, again, to pay for one student to go to school for 1 year. So a family of four, one attending college, the custodial parents, now I use the word custodial. Custodial parent is the parent in case of a divorce or separation. Custodial parent is the parent who supports to the greater extent the student who's going to be attending. So in this case, we have custodial parents that are married. Both are age 50. Their adjusted gross income, in this example, $100,000. Remember, that's line 11 on your tax return, your 1040. So your adjusted gross income, $100,000, your savings and investments, $50,000, student income, $3,000, student savings, zero. I'm going to touch on a couple of things. As I mentioned, the parent's income is assessed at 22 to 47%. It hits the 47% number when the adjusted gross income exceeds $70,000. But there is something called a family size allocation. And what that is, just to put it into perspective, it's how much it costs reasonably, how much it reasonably costs to raise a family of four for 1 year. Well, each of you envision a number of what it costs to raise a family of four. But according to the Department of Education, it's $28,000 a year. Typically, when I speak before a live audience, this is where I get a lot of hoes and hums and laughter. So in Bergen County, you have an adjustment to your AGI for calculating the student aid index of 28,000. So in this example, $100,000 minus 28,000 brings you down to what? $72,000. 72,000 is above the $70,000 number. So that's 47% of that number. So you're still looking at $33,000 plus on your student aid index. And this is just one of four components. Remember, there's the parent income, the student's income, the parent's assets, the student's assets. Let's move on to the next, savings and investments. In this case, I've listed $50,000. The savings and investment assessment is at 5.64%. But there is an allowance based on age. And that's why I use age 50, both parents. You take the older of the two parents. And just case in point, A 50-year-old parent, older of the two, has a $50,000 allowance off of their savings investments. In this case, this family of four has 50,000. They have an allowance of $50,000, which means that their assets and savings are not counted. So they're still looking at that student aid index of 33,850. If for a moment they had $100,000 or $150,000 in savings and investments, with $100,000, they're going to add another $5,640 or 5.64, correct, to the 33,850. But they're expected to be able to afford to pay for one student attending college for 1 year. So again, you see the SAI grows based on the numbers that you're providing. Now, one thing that's important to remember is that in the past, the Department of Education doesn't count your retirement assets. So if the bulk of your savings is in retirement, it's not going to hurt you. The other thing that they don't count is the equity that you have in your home, your primary residence. If for a moment you have other properties, those aren't counted, and they're going to be subject to that 5.64%. Now remember, you got to do the FAFSA annually. So these numbers are going to change every single year. You're going to do it for 4 years or for at least as many years as your son or daughter is in college. The student's income, a lot of kids work. Student can earn up to $6,000 and be excluded from adding those numbers to the student aid index. In this case, family of four, student only earns $3,000 a year. There's no assessment. It's under the $6,000 number. Student savings zero, a student's savings is assessed at 20%, 20 cents on the dollar, where a parent's savings and investment, 5.64%, a little bit more than a quarter of the amount of student savings. So moms and dads, if you have money in the name of your son or daughter, checking account, under their Social Security number, they're going to be assessed on the day that you submit the FAFSA. Talk a little bit more about that and questions and answers. So let's look at an example. Cost of attendance. In this case, I have cost of attendance listed on the left side, vertically in yellow. So we have, as an example, the cost of Ivy League schools, $58,000, working your way to the right. That's tuition and fees, room and board 17, books and supplies 1,500. Transportation, remember, these are numbers that are displayed on each individual college and university's website. So the cost of attending, let's say, in this case, an Ivy League school, $80,000 a year. Private college, $37,000, substantially less in tuition, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, and so on, $54,000 total cost of attending. Public school, all the way to the right, $42,000. State school, all the way to the right, $25,200. Again, we're just looking at cost of attendance as an example. And again, cost of attendance is everything all in. It includes personal expenses, which I didn't mention before. So my daughter attending Drexel, yes, she was on the meal plan. That was part of the cost of attendance. But occasionally she would go out and have coffee at Starbucks or go out to dinner or for drinks. Personal expenses, just the fact that you're living away from home. There is a certain allocation for what are referred to as personal expenses, includes additional food, entertainment, and so on. So let's look at this calculation, for lack of a better term. The cost of attending a school minus the student aid index, it is the product of the FAFSA, determines financial need. So in this case, we're looking at a community college, cost of attending $5,000, student is commuting. Student aid index, the product of the FAFSA, says that the family can afford to pay $25,000 a year. So their need is zero. Let's look at the state school just to the right. Cost of attending, $26,000. Student aid index, $25,000. Their need is $1,000 to send that student to school for 1 year. How are they going to pay for that $1,000? It's going to be savings. Have they put money aside in the student's name? Remember, that's a bad way of doing it. There is an option to put it into a 529 account, which is a parent asset. Remember, parents are assessed at 5.64 after the age allowance. Let's look to the right. You got a $50,000 private college, total cost all in. $25,000 student aid index, their need is 25,000. Again, where's that money coming from? And look at the elite, 60,000 minus the student aid index, their need is $35,000. I'm going to kind of turn the tables on this because, as I've mentioned, the federal financial aid money is not that great, and it's for families who show need. So where does the money come from? You're not necessarily going to get it from the state unless you can show need there. And in order to get money from the state of New Jersey, your son or daughter has to attend a college in the state. Doesn't matter if it's a state school, a private school, it's an elite. As long as it's in the state of New Jersey, they will be considered for state financial aid. I'll give you those numbers in a bit. So again, let's look at this for a moment. And let me ignore for a moment the top of the screen where I have community college, state college, private school, and elites. It is the goal of every college to become an elite. Elite schools like Princeton, Harvard, Duke, Emory. These schools can command the highest tuition and make the most profit because you have to remember, these schools are in business to make money. They don't do it for the good graces of a nonprofit. They want to make money. They want to attract the 4.0 and higher grade point average. They want to attract students who have excelled on their standardized tests. They want to continue to accept students, not based on grades, because they typically will only accept cream of the crop students. They want to accept students from different locations throughout the state, or excuse me, from throughout the country. They want to attract students from international countries. They want to be able to brag about their diversity as far as geographical, ethnicity. They want to always list or accept students where possible who have achieved the highest grades. So when you want to consider for a moment, students in the Northeast who are applying to Harvard are going to really be selected based on academics. You get a student who applies to Harvard from New Mexico. You're talking about a geographical distance. They might accept a student with a 3.8 grade point average over a 4.0 student here in the Northeast. They get all they need locally, and they want to bring people from great distances. The other issue is they want to be able to say that they will accept students no matter how they're able to pay for school. Yes, they're in business to make money, but they have huge endowments. So these elite colleges, these very expensive schools, $80,000 and $90,000 a year in some cases, are sitting at the top of the pyramid. The private colleges, like Drexel University, where my daughter attended, are looking to become the elite. So how do they become the elite? They become the elite by being able to brag that their incoming freshman class has achieved a 3.8, 3.9, 4.0 grade point average, so that they can ultimately raise the cost of a student attending, because our kids want to attend what they consider the best schools in the country. And if Drexel could ultimately earn that title of being an elite, they're going to start charging $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and their students are going to reflect superior academic performance. They want to be able to jump from this column, private college, ignore the label, to the elite category. These schools that are in the second column are going to want to become the same caliber of the private colleges. They may be accepting students with a 2.5 grade point average right now. They want to ultimately raise their level to the 3.2, 3.4, 3.5 GPA. Because once they do that, they can start raising the cost of attending. Let me give you an example. This is where money comes from. It doesn't come from the federal side in most cases. It doesn't come from the state side because even with the greatest financial aid packages that the federal government and state government offer, it's still not going to be able to pay the total cost of attending. It comes from merit aid, academic accomplishment, and the endowments of those schools. Many of you have heard of Rider University. Rider University is about an hour and a half south of us. Rider University a few years ago had a presidential scholarship. It's on their website. Rider University published that their presidential scholar with a 3.2 grade point average and a certain level of standardized test score will give you a $24,000 presidential merit aid scholarship. Now they're advertising. The fact that they're advertising it, they're saying, please apply. If you're a student and you fit into this category, we'll give you $24,000 to attend a year. We're going to knock the price of attending Rider University almost in half. So they're going to say, we can make our school affordable, as affordable or even more affordable than a state school. So please apply. Why? Because Rider wants to move to the right in this column. They want to become a private level. They want to become an elite ultimately. How? By saying every single year that our incoming freshman class has achieved a 3.3, 3.4, 3.5 grade point average. By saying this, they're paying for students to come. And that's where money comes from. I hear from parents all the time who say, I didn't apply to that school because it's too expensive. I can only apply to like a Rutgers or a community college because that's all we can afford. But guess what? If your son or daughter has achieved these numbers, they can apply to the private schools that are 3 times as much as a community college, 4 times as much. The schools are in competition for the best students. It's not the student who is competing with their fellow student to get into these schools. Please ask any questions that you have along the way. So let's talk about federal money. As I had mentioned, it doesn't really amount to a whole lot. You have to show financial need as reported through the FAFSA based on your income, adjusted gross income, line 11 on your 1040. Keep in mind those numbers. Federal Pell Grants, less than $7,500 a year. In order to wind up with the Pell Grant, you have to have an adjusted gross income of less than $60,000 a year. I'm going to show you a slide in a few minutes. It's going to give you a little bit of direction. The SCOG is a supplemental education grant of an additional $4,000. Federal Work Study is a student working on campus. You can earn $1,500 a year. That $1,500 doesn't apply to the $6,000 that I told you they can earn. That's excluded. There is certain loans that are offered by filling out the FAFSA. There's a subsidized loan that's no interest, no payments of $3,500 for a freshman, $4,500 for a sophomore, $5,500 for a junior, and $5,500 for senior. There's also an additional $2,000 on the unsubsidized side of these direct federal loans. I always encourage parents to take those loans, or their student loans is what they are. So in their first year, they're going to have $5,500 worth of student loans, $6,500 the second year, $7,500 in their third, and their $7,500 in their fourth. If they graduate in 4 years, they graduate with $27,000 in student loan debt. They haven't made a single payment. That's fine. The $2,000 is an incidental amount of interest that's going to accrue. My kids each took the direct subsidized loan. Payments begin 6 months after graduation, even if it takes them 5 or 6 years to graduate. The idea is that it makes the student a little bit responsible for paying some of the cost of them attending. They're going to get a job, God willing, after graduation, and they're going to start making payments and start building a solid credit score. I always encourage us to go on. So again, federal Pell Grant, not going to happen in most cases. SCOG grant, not going to happen. Teach grant, if your student wants to become a teacher, but then again, they're going to have to teach in a designated area in order to continue to and qualify and not have to repay that teach grant. So the numbers that I've listed below, I believe they're pretty accurate again. The numbers have yet to be published for this year. There's also additional monies that can be borrowed on the federal side by the parent called the Parent Plus loan. Not a great deal. There's also additional points, origination costs that have to be paid in order to qualify for this. There are better ways to go, and I can always talk to any of you about this if you are interested. So again, the maximum Pell Grant, $7,395. That was last year's number. I think it's going to be the same this year. Just a gross income of under 60,000. Again, it's line 11. Assets are not factored in if your AGI is 60,000 or less. You'll automatically qualify for a $7,395 Pell Grant, and you might even be considered for an SCOG. In the example tax return that I had given where John Public was self-employed, they were able to reduce their taxable income from 100,000 down to $75,000. It's still above that $60,000 number. But if you're a self-employed individual filing a Schedule C, general tax or a general partnership return, or a corporate return, be it a 1120S or just a regular C corporation, there are expenses that can offset the income that you're reporting, and there can be a huge opportunity. I speak to accountants on behalf of parents all the time to see if a parent can possibly adjust the way that they're reporting a family's taxed. But keep in mind, with the change in the FAFSA in 2023, you're reporting information that is 2 years old. So they can't backtrack 2 years, but they might be able to save you money for their junior or senior year in college. I'm very surprised I'm not getting any questions, but that's fine. Maybe I'm giving a pretty thorough understanding. So federal student aid, U.S. citizen, nationalized or eligible non-citizen, high school diploma equivalent, could be a high school GED. You have to be attending a school for an eligible degree or certificate program. It's called Title IV. So there are many trade schools that are Title IV. If your son or daughter is not college material and they want to go to a trade school, make sure that the trade school you're sending them to qualifies as Title IV. Student has a valid Social Security number. Even without a Social Security number, we can get something done. Once they get into college, they have to continue to make satisfactory academic performance. Can't be dropping out of different classes and not really moving forward from their freshman to sophomore to junior year. So student aid or EFC is gone. Expected family contribution is gone, replaced with SAI in 2023. Again, the formula is cost of attending a college minus a student aid index demonstrating need. Colleges determine what the cost of attending their school is. The FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, is not something you should Google. Just go to fafsa.gov, fafsa.gov. Each school will give you the cost of attendance. So how do you pay for school? Well, a few years ago, a home equity line of credit was a great deal. That was before interest rates skyrocketed. Home equity line of credit you could get for 3.5%, 4%. When you apply to a bank like PNC or TD Bank or any of the other banks out there for home equity line of credit, we were able to get 3.5%. That's also a tax deductible item if you file Schedule A with your taxes. With tax reform in 2018, they increased the standard deduction, making it very attractive for majority of tax filers to take the standard deduction as opposed to filing Schedule A and taking individual deductions like taxes, interest rates, charitable contributions, medical deductions above 7.5% of your modified adjusted gross income. But with interest rates rising, home equity line of credits, home equity borrowing exceeds the 9% figure. It was substantially lower a few years ago. So home equity line of credit is not necessarily the best approach to take, but it is something we should consider. Parent Plus loan, not the greatest. As I said, rates are way up there. They used to be substantially lower. And once you borrow as a parent, you're locking in that rate until that loan is paid back. But now it's up above the 9% range. You might be able to get a little bit better once they come out with the numbers. New Jersey class loan is one direction that I point a lot of parents in. Your son or daughter doesn't have to attend a New Jersey school. They can attend schools anywhere in the country and the world. They can borrow through the NJ class loan program. Yes, there is an origination fee, but look at the 10-year rate, 5.99. It was as low as 2.99. If you go with a 15-year, interest-only payments, options are available. If you go with a 20-year, fixed rate 7.9, it's a better deal than the Parent Plus loan. Pell Grant eligibility, again, we talked about the minimum Pell, how they calculate it, and it's under $60,000 in adjusted gross income. So we've been talking about the FAFSA, the federal form. There's a number of schools out there that are also going to look for what is referred to as the institutional form. It's called the CSS profile. About 10% of the schools in the country ask for this additional form. Every school is going to ask for the FAFSA. But 10% of those schools are going to ask for this additional CSS profile form, where the FAFSA does not ask for the value of your primary residence. CSS profile will. So if you live in $1 million house all paid for, FAFSA doesn't care. CSS profile factors that in. FAFSA doesn't count the value of your retirement assets. That's your IRA, your 401k, your 403b, any qualified plan, including a simple IRA for the self-employed individuals. FAFSA doesn't care about those. CSS profile does. They want to factor in what your retirement assets are. FAFSA in the past did not care about the value of your business if you're self-employed. You could have $1 million business, $1 million home, and $1 million in your retirement account. FAFSA says you need money. They don't count any of the CSS profile, wants to know all three. So the CSS profile, a little bit more strict than the FAFSA. But then again, these are typically the schools that have the most money to give away in the form of merit aid. Don't misunderstand. There are plenty of schools out there that have huge endowments that don't ask for the CSS profile. But as you are searching these schools, keep in mind that you need to also explore what financial aid forms they are requiring. And based on your family's financial picture, you might want to be selective as far as what colleges you want your son or daughter to apply to. I did also mention in the beginning that there are 3 ways to apply: regular admission, early action, early decision. A lot of students have stars in their eyes and they want to apply to the biggest name schools that they won't necessarily get into. Yet they want to apply so bad that they apply early decision. Early decision is a one-way contract. So if for a moment your son or daughter applies to Duke or Emory or Rice, early decision, if that school accepts your son or daughter, that's where they got to go. They got to drop all of their other applications. They made a commitment to go to that school because they're applying early decision. Early decision means they're attending even if you're not getting a single dime in financial aid. So it could be a huge financial burden on your family to allow your son or daughter to apply early decision. Again, only apply to one school early decision, all the other schools early action. If early decision comes in, you drop all the other schools, they're gone, and you're attending that school. If you apply early action, you have all the time in the world up until May 1st. Remember that second slide that I showed you? In red, May 1st is decision day. You can apply to as many schools as you want early action. My daughter Danielle applied to 9 different schools. Out of the 9 schools she applied to, she was accepted at 8. Why was she accepted at 8 and that last one not? Well, it was one of the easiest schools to get into. But that school looked at her academic numbers and said this student can easily get into this school. There are 3 ways to grade these schools: safety schools, target schools, and reach. Danielle applied to 3 reach schools, hard to get into, 3 target schools, right in her neck of the woods, 3 safety schools as a backup in case she didn't get into the other schools of her choice. Safety schools always gave her that option of being accepted somewhere. The school that denied her acceptance thought for a moment, this is going to be a safety school for the student. If we accept her, she has until May 1st to decide whether she's coming or not. If we accept her, we're tying up a seat till May 1st, at which point we're going to drop her from the accepted students list, which means that we have to scramble around to fill that seat, and we're not going to get a student that has still some academic credibility to them. We want to fill that seat with someone who's going to make us look better. Remember, they want to jump a column. They want to ultimately become an elite. So Danielle was turned down in that one school. She didn't want to go to Drexel. It was one of her target schools, but we made a deal. And the deal is that any school that you apply to that you get accepted at, you're going to student orientation or accepted students day. She didn't want to go to Drexel. She went to accepted students day and they rolled out the red carpet. In rolling out the red carpet, they offer her a scholarship for chamber choir. She loves to sing. They gave her honors dorm. They gave her early registration. They made her feel important. She walked up out of that weekend for accepted students day and says, I'm going to Drexel. We didn't get any federal financial aid. We didn't get any state financial aid. She's in Pennsylvania. She didn't attend a school in New Jersey. But the cost of attending Drexel was probably, if I look back, no more than it would have cost her to attend a state school in the state of New Jersey. She got a great education. She got a degree in graphic arts. She did work in her senior year for one of the local businesses who hired her on the spot when she graduated. She's doing well, living in Philadelphia, a couple hours away. She's not too far away. But in the process, she did have to fill out the CSS profile. The CSS profile did not affect her numbers. They liked her academics. They wanted her to fill that seat the fall year that she attended. They thought that she would make them look good and raise their level. Remember, the student is an asset to the school. The school is competing for the best student. She got a great deal, great education. She's got a great job. And I encourage all of you to consider not the cost, but the school and the endowment that they have. CSS profile also becomes live on October 1st. You go to collegeboard.org. You can Google CSS profile online. You can click on the application, begin the process. Again, you're going to need your 2024 tax return. The dashboard on CSS Profile College Board looks a little bit different. When your son or daughter applied for the SAT, they went on to College Board and they created a username and ID. That same username and ID is what they're going to use for the CSS profile. Inevitably, if your son or daughter is applying to 10 schools, at least 2 of them are going to be CSS profile schools. Again, information that is not already populated, they're going to have to provide, not that difficult. So again, keeping in mind the CSS profile versus the FAFSA, home equity, not considered by the FAFSA, considered by the CSS profile, your small business, same situation. FAFSA looks at it, CSS doesn't. Custodial parent on the FAFSA, in the case of a divorce or separation, means that you're only reporting one parent's income and savings. With the CSS profile, if it's a divorce or separated type of situation, you're filling out the custodial parent profile and the non-custodial parent profile. The custodial parent profile is going to take into consideration the family. If dad is the custodial parent based on providing the most support for the student, and dad is remarried, you're looking at the income of dad and his new wife and their savings and investments. If you're looking at mom, who might be the non-custodial parent, she is filling out the non-custodial parent profile. If she's remarried, her income and her new husband's. With the CSS profile, you're looking possibly 4 incomes to report on the CSS profile, where on the FAFSA, you're only reporting 1. Student assets, 20 cents on the dollar versus 5.64 cents. Siblings' assets are not really factored in. The deadline, each school is going to set their own. With the FAFSA, you can file a FAFSA up to June 1st. The CSS profile, monitor your deadlines. But keep in mind also, many schools do have what are called priority filing dates for the FAFSA. So you have to know the priority filing dates for the CSS profile, especially when filing or applying early action. These schools want to know who's going to fill those seats as soon as possible. They're going to want to make the best deal, making schools most affordable in competition with the other schools, so that they're going to land this student before May 1st. These schools are competing with each other, and they don't want to be sitting there on ice waiting for May 1st to roll around to see who's going to fill that seat. I'm going to give you an example. I talked about my daughter, Danielle. My daughter, Alyssa, was a film student. She only wanted to apply to 5 schools, film schools. Out of the 5 schools she applied to, she got into 4 of the 5. It was getting close to May 1st. She wanted to go to the Roy H. Park School, Ithaca, New York. But she didn't get in to the Park School, or at least she hadn't been notified. So I said, Alyssa, you got to call the school. You got to express your interest. Remember that May 1st deadline, they want to know who's coming. And if you show interest, they're going to know that maybe they'll accept you because you will guaranteed fill that seat. So please call the school, let them know you're interested. But she wouldn't. So I took it upon myself. You know, does this work for every parent? I don't think so. But I called the school. It was prior to May 1st. Hi, this is Bob Traitz. I'm calling on behalf of my daughter, Alyssa. She applied to the Roy H. Park School. And she heard from 4 of the other colleges that she applied to, hasn't yet heard from the Park School. She'd love to attend. As a matter of fact, she's holding off for Park School attendance. Would you please let me know the status? I heard that admissions officer paging through applications. Now, they got 22,000 applications, 12,000 for the Park School. She said, oh, I'm looking at Alyssa's application. Now here I just was successful in getting that admissions officer and sorting through all of those applications and focusing on Alyssa. And as she's reviewing it, very impressive. So she's done film at Ramapo High School, where she was in the university program. I see that she's also gotten involved this, that, and the other thing. Very impressive. But I have to tell you, Mr. Traitz, We have 12,000 applications for the film major in the Park School. Out of the 12,000, only 50 students are accepted. I have to be honest, she's not one of the top 50. She's high up there, but she's not one of the top 50. So I gave Alyssa the news, and she decided that she was going to accept another school. So we accepted, we paid the deposit so that she'd be in the dorm. And she was all set, a little disappointed, but she was all set to attend another college. Just on a hunch, I think it was May 2nd or 3rd, somewhere shortly after May 1st. I called that admissions officer back and I said, "Hey, this is Bob Traitz again." And she said, "Hi, Mr. Traitz. How's Alyssa doing? Where's she going to go to college?" And I told her where she accepted. I said, "But she still would love to come to Park." Is there any chance that one of those 50 accepted students turned you down? And she said, "If I accepted Alyssa, would she still come?" So you understand, even though these colleges are making these offers and filling those seats on who they expect will be coming, some of these students are picking other schools. May 1st comes around and those 50 accepted students who have not said yes are dropped from the admissions list. Now they have to scramble to fill those seats. At the right time, I called. I offered up Alyssa, who was really a top student, but not the top 50. They accepted Alyssa. And she got into the Roy H. Park School of Communications as a film major. She graduated. She's worked on Blue Bloods for a couple of years. She's made a couple of independent films with her husband. She's married now, and she's doing great. So that's a success story that I can't guarantee that any of you will realize. But the point that I'm trying to make, that May 1st deadline is so very, very important because it's the colleges in competition for your son or daughter. It's not your son or daughter who is competing with other students to get into those colleges, because that's the mindset that many students have. And that's why students apply early decision. They shouldn't be doing that unless you can certainly afford to pay whatever cost and sacrifice your retirement. I don't encourage that. I hope that story hits home. There is state of New Jersey financial aid. When you complete the FAFSA, there's going to be a connection on the FAFSA to start your state application. Remember, if you're a state resident, you attend a school in the state of New Jersey, you will be considered for state financial aid, but only if they attend a college in the state of New Jersey. This is an old FAFSA. This is the confirmation page after the FAFSA has been submitted. There was a click here button to complete your state of New Jersey financial aid application. It can be very lucrative. These are numbers from, excuse me, a couple of years ago. Demonstrate financial need, $0 to $65,000, be a citizen or not eligible non-citizen, New Jersey resident, and attending a full-time program in the state. These are some of the awards that the state of New Jersey, Department of Higher Education awards. Community college, $2,840. Look at Rutgers. Look at NJIT. They'll knock $10,900 off if you show need. If you're a New Jersey resident, you attend a New Jersey school. Rowan will give $8,000. Rutgers, $9,500. Pretty lucrative. Again, you have to show need. Not everybody's going to qualify. There are the STARS program for attending top 15% of the graduating class, attending community college for 2 years. You can talk to the guidance department about that. 529 college savings programs. When people ask me, I am in the investment business also, besides being a certified financial planner. Someone approaches me and says, "I want to put money away for a 529 college savings plan." I'm going to give them a direct link to the state of New Jersey where you can buy a 529 and not pay a commission. If I were to sell any of my clients a 529, the client is going to take a hit, 3 to 4%. These are monies that you guys need for college. I'm going to send them to the state of New Jersey website where they can apply for NJ Best. Putting money into NJ Best directly through the state of New Jersey gives you a college savings program. The new tax law says you can get up to $10,000 state resident tax return deduction, not on your federal return, state of New Jersey. Your money can grow tax-free if it's used for qualified post-secondary expenses, tuition, fees, books, equipment that is needed for the study. Publication 970 is a tax form that refers to what deductions you can take for higher education expenses. They have to be qualified. So when you take a distribution from your 529 account, you're going to receive what's called a 1099-Q. School is going to issue a 1099-T. These are tax forms, just like your interest and dividend and capital gains that you have to give to your accountant unless you do your taxes yourself. 1099-Q, qualified distribution of 529, has to match up against your 1099-T tuition expense. It has to be a qualified expense, otherwise you're going to lose that tax-free distribution. I implore you, compare the schools, look at the financial aid packages, accept the school that meets your financial need. Communicate with the financial aid office. Think of what I did with Ithaca College and how well Alyssa made out.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
One question that comes up quite often with parents is one of the things that we've been letting them know is that they can accept part or all or some of a financial aid package. They do not have to accept, say, the unsubsidized loans if they didn't want.
Correct. So what will happen is once your son or daughter accepts a school, they'll go on to the accepted students portal on that college's website. On that college's website, click on the financial aid tab. Under financial aid, you're going to see what is referred to as the award letter. The award letter is going to say what the cost is to attend this college based on their major. It's going to then, based on the information provided on the FAFSA and maybe the CSS profile, it's going to say what the merit scholarship is and the name of the merit scholarship. It's going to refer to the offer of the direct federal loans, $3,500 for a student. Again, it's subsidized. No interest is accruing. No payments are necessary. They're going to be offering the $2,000 per year unsubsidized. There'll be a tab that'll say accept or decline. So why would anyone decline the merit scholarship? It's free money. But certainly you might want to consider accepting or declining any part of the loan process or any of the other awards they might be offering, including the Parent Plus loan. The Parent Plus loan is a gap filler. It is the parent taking a loan that one parent is obligated, whoever signs it, whether it's mom or dad. It cannot be forgiven, the Parent Plus loan, under bankruptcy. You're on the hook for it until you die. If you die, it's forgiven. If you become permanently disabled, it's forgiven. You have to prove that. But then again, at rates of 9+%, I don't necessarily know that you want to accept that. Click the decline button. And we'll talk about other sources of getting college paid for. There's a lot of other options available, including what I said was a New Jersey class loan. Michael, does that answer that question? Are there any others?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. Keep in mind, folks, my contact information is at the bottom of the screen. Senior parents, please feel free to reach out. I'll give you an answer a lot quicker than you're going to get from the many other sources that you want to pursue. Yes, you can go to Google or ask AI. You might get a good answer there. But if you want, bounce the question off of me. I'm happy to perform. So other scholarships outside, any scholarship that you might receive is going to count against the student award package that the accepted college, where you accept the college, is going to offer. So if there is a merit award, yet you wind up with some outside award, including a high school award at grant night, the school could potentially deduct the merit award amount, reduce the merit award amount by whatever grant you're given. But these are some of the other sources you can consider. So if I'm going to get something stuck in your mind, senior parents, start today or this weekend. Apply for the ID and password. Remember, you need one for one parent and one for the student. Sit down with your son or daughter side by side in front of the computer, start working on it. If you need some direction, give me a call, shoot me a text. Okay. FAFSA goes live next week. Look for each individual college's priority filing deadlines. Stick to those deadlines, otherwise it could cost you enormously. If you need to get on the phone with the Federal Department of Federal Education and talk about your FAFSA, 1-800-4FED-AID is a good number. That data retrieval tool, which is called the FTI now, you must agree to import your tax information. Even if your son or daughter does not file a tax return, they must agree. The student invites the parent on their FAFSA application to be a contributor by providing the parent's name, address, email address, and so on and so forth. Not a hard process, but as I said, you can do it. You can complete the FAFSA probably in one sitting in about a half hour, 40 minutes, or you can start the FAFSA, stop it. Information is saved, go back into it, continue it, save it again, just by hitting the confirm button to move from page to page, ultimately submitting it. The student will submit, at which point the parent will receive an email as a contributor. Every student has to inform the parent of any email that they're receiving from the Department of Education. Parents are not going to be informed on this. It's crazy, but that's the way that it is. Once you get the student aid report, make sure that you look at errors and correct anything by re-signing into the FAFSA and editing it. If you have more than 20 schools that your son or daughter is applying to, you can always add schools and delete those that you've already submitted previously. Those 20 schools will receive the student aid report. You can then delete them by editing the FAFSA and adding more schools. Meet the deadlines, don't miss out. Studentaid.gov, an important website. Again, you're going to get copies of these slides, and I appreciate your attending. The numbers are wrong at the top. This is the 26-27 financial aid process. Next week it goes live. Any final questions? I'm here.
I've unmuted everyone's microphone, so if anyone has a question, please feel free to speak up.
Yes, I have a question. Do you have any recommendations regarding continuing contributions to the 529 once your child is in college? Do you keep doing that? And also, do you recommend using that 529 freshman year, kind of use as much as you can early on, or am I saving that for the future?
Okay, so that's an excellent question, and the answer changes given the economic environment. I happen to be an extreme optimist on the market. I'm extremely optimistic on the economy. I think a lot of contributors to that is the new tax rules that were recently introduced by this, what they refer to as the big beautiful bill. I'm not going to comment on the name of the bill, but the contents of the bill are very, very important. A lot of tax savings, a lot of tax benefits for families. Seniors get another $6,000 over 65 per person as far as tax benefits. Parents are going to have more money in their pocket because the average family is probably going to pick up another $4,000 to $5,000 a year in tax savings. That money goes into the economy. That money goes into the market. When you put money into a 529 account, it is invested in assets that I expect will continue to perform. So consider for a moment, if you have 529 money and it's not enough to pay for college education, do you still put money into the 529? Given the state of the economy, I'm optimistic. I think it's a good idea because the benefit of a 529 is going to be the tax-free growth if the money is used to pay for higher education, qualified higher education expenses. So I'm optimistic that that will continue. But consider the alternative. Nothing is guaranteed. Though I'm optimistic on the economy and the market could turn at any time. The economy could turn at any time. At which point, putting money into a 529 putting it into a position where it could potentially drop in value concerns me. So it's really an individual gut feeling on your part. Should you continue to 529? Should you continue to fund it, or should you simply park the money in a separate account in the parent's name and keep it in, let's say, a U.S. Treasury money market? The U.S. Treasury money markets that I'm putting my clients in right now pay about 4%. 4% is not bad, but it will not go down. Won't go up, but it won't go down. Earning 4% on your money while you're waiting for a college bill to come in, you pay that bill with that money that is completely safe at a decent rate of return. Keep in mind, inflation is still ticking along at just under 3%. So you're still making a little bit of a gain being in a 4% U.S. Treasury portfolio. It's daily liquidable. It's much better than a bank. And I hope that kind of answers your question. One other point of continue to put money into a 529 is the state of New Jersey resident tax return deduction that was introduced a few years ago. There you have a little bang for your buck.